Good morning and welcome back to the Rockville City Council vacancy interviews. Today is Saturday, March 2nd. This is meeting number 10-A. I'll start by just saying a little bit about the process we're going to go through this morning. We'll do opening statements, which I will ask you all, and then we'll split up with the council members on the questions. We have 3 questions prepared. We'll divide up who goes first each time so it's not the same. And partway through that question session, if we think we need to, we'll repeat the question. You don't have them in front of you, and it just might be easier if we repeat it partway through. So welcome to all of you, and thank you for giving us your time today. We'd like to start with opening statements, and we'll start with Jackie Fung. Welcome, Ms. Fung.
Thank you. My name is Jackie Fung, and I'm from the Twin Brook area. I am Asian American immigrant. I am also an active businesswoman and love volunteering throughout the Maryland, DC, and Virginia. And I also travel to California for volunteering service. I believe that with my passion in the Rockville City, I can bring in more diverse culture, perspective, and help the city grow. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Miles.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. My name is David Miles. I appreciate this opportunity to be considered to fill the open City Council seat. I'm a husband, father, son, brother, and grandson. I believe that Rockville should afford all of those individuals the ability to realize their full potential, including my grandparents who are encountering the challenges of aging safely in place, my retiring parents, my infant child, and my partner. Helping to run a newly created small business has taught me that early investment in people has significant long-term benefits for both our bottom line and the health and wealth of people themselves. I also work full-time as a pediatrician and have taken care of children in cities, the rural countryside, military bases, Native American reservations, and developing countries, in addition to providing free medical care to a primarily Spanish-speaking population. Fundamental to being a pediatrician is spending a significant portion of my time working and advocating for people who cannot do so for themselves. I will take that same mentality to work and advocate for citizens, all citizens of the city, so that they can also realize their full potential, especially those at the margins, including children walking along unsafe streets to overcrowded schools, senior citizens on fixed incomes dealing with increasing tax burdens, those with disabilities who have difficulty accessing city services either virtually or physically, families on the east side of Rockville Pike who are paying their fair share but do not have the same access to amenities as those living on the west side, and others struggling to pay their exorbitant rents and mortgages so as not to move from this vibrant city. In the end, all of us want the same thing, to live in a place that we and our loved ones will thrive. Rockville has been such a place for many, and with the right direction from this council, can be that place for many more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Mr. Theroff.
Good morning, Mayor Newton and Council. I'm applying to be appointed to the Rockville City Council because I believe that I can assist you by working to achieve consensus and agreement on the coming issues over the next 9 months. I think I can help you be more effective in the coming months when the election, which is on the horizon, will likely intensify and harden differences between you. Gridlock on the council indicates there is likely a struggle to come to consensus on the upcoming issues of the budget, development proposals, the details of APFS, Redgate, and town center's viability. I offer my demonstrated ability to bring parties to reach compromise solutions to challenging and divisive issues. I was able to have parties compromise and reach long-lasting solutions to divisive problems. For example, RMHS. That compromise has worked long-term. RMHS was on the Board of Education's list of schools to be closed when I and other leaders stepped forward. The introduction of the IB program, attendance boundary fights, obtaining the resources to make RM and its cluster schools even better, helped to make RMHS the sterling school it is. I haven't reached out to any of you. And I did that so that I do not have an agenda other than to help you develop a balanced and reasoned decision-making process. I don't even know which of you will seek re-election during what I think will be an intense campaign in the coming months. If the upcoming issues that you face can be reached without any assistance, then I'm probably not your best candidate. If you select me, you are agreeing to openly consider options leading to compromise and consensus. Let me help you achieve long-term results.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boylan.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I am Vincent Chip Boylan, a 30-year resident and homeowner in the city. For 20 years, I have been serving the Rockville community, most notably as a member of the Rockville Recreation and Parks Advisory Board, including 2 terms as chairperson of that body. 10 years ago, I was among the first mayor and council trustee appointments to the Rockville Recreation and Parks Foundation, a nonprofit foundation that supports rec and park programs in the city. I'm currently president of that foundation. I was a member of the original King Farm Farmstead Task Force and a member of the city's last Caregiver Grant Committee in 2017. My 20 years of city involvement have included interaction with every mayor and council and numerous city staff members, and enable me to visit and be familiar with virtually every city site and facility and many of its programs. I'm a lifelong Washingtonian, having been born in Washington, D.C., grew up in Falls Church, Virginia, and a Montgomery County resident since 1981. I am retired after a 40-plus year career in the insurance brokerage industry. I began my career working for a 25-person local employer and concluded it as one of 40,000 employees with a publicly traded international organization. I have both enjoyed and suffered through the strengths and weaknesses of those diverse companies and gained invaluable management and personal experience in the process. My business journey also involved volunteering with local, regional, and national industry associations. I attained and succeeded leadership roles in these organizations as summarized in the application I have submitted to you. There are 2 common themes in my industry and Rockville volunteer commitments and success. First, I've been willing to face the sometimes difficult tasks and decisions that come with the position.
Boylan, I need to stop you. That's your 2 minutes are up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Mr. Morris.
Good morning. So, as some of you may know, I'm a longtime resident. Grandparents moved here in the 60s. My parents moved here in the 90s, and I've had the good fortune to be able to live and work in the city since. I've, as a younger man, walked probably 2/3 of the city, so not quite as much as some members of council, but I've seen a lot of it by foot and noticed lots of little things along the way that, even as the developments and changes and renovations throughout the last 10, 15 years have taken place, seem a little bit left behind. A few friends and I got more heavily involved in advocacy over the last several years, since about 2015, and in recent months it became apparent that there were some things that just needed a little bit more attention or maybe a slightly different perspective. So when the seat for council was announced, we kind of milled about amongst us as to who should probably step in to fill that gap. My long history as being an entrepreneur and consultant to other people trying to get things off the ground made it so that my bid was slightly more competitive, at least in their eyes. I hope you'll be convinced of the same by the end of this. But was trying to find ways to help the council move in a direction that allows the city to be a little bit more accessible, both physically and digitally, a little bit more adaptable for the changes in the economy now and into the future, and hopefully a little bit more affordable so that those in my generation now have similar opportunities to those that my grandparents and my parents did when they moved to Rockville.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ashton.
Thank you for having me here. My name is Monique LaRock Ashton. I am a mother of 2 children who attend schools here in Rockville. I have been involved with Rockville through a number of things. One, as a beneficiary of the great services that you all provide. We are part of the swim center. We do summer camps. Also, I decided to get heavily involved in our community development, and so I currently served as the cluster coordinator for the Richard Montgomery cluster, which represents our 5 elementary schools, middle school and high school. I have also been involved with Rockville charities and businesses, and being a part of civic engagement has been part of my DNA. My mother used to sing to me, "We shall overcome," and it's been like that ever since. I am tremendously proud of the way we've been able to get communities together through the Richard Montgomery Cluster Coordinator work. I've had a chance to work in communities, listen to their needs, increase participation at some of the meetings that were not so well attended, to really survey and find out why and what. I am someone who builds consensus. I am someone who listens and who is fair. I also organized the Board of Education meeting in Twin Brook and got some families to come out that weren't traditionally people who came to meetings. I've advocated for several improvements in our high schools. I have organized community service activities to bring folks together. I have organized activities to support Rockville businesses, as well as supporting some of our schools and neighborhood associations. I've supported students with financial need. And most recently, I've had the opportunity to work on the APFS work group. This experience encouraged me to be able to get more involved. I think that for me, I would like to see us supporting families and advocating for our schools' smart growth and business development, as well as supporting more civic engagement.
Thank you very much. So we are now ready for questions. And I think last time we started with you, Councilmember, first. So this time we'll start with Councilmember Pershela first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And so what we're going to do is go the opposite direction, starting with Ms. Ashton. First question, and remember as we go along, if you need a repeat of the question, that's no problem. Of what civic accomplishment are you most proud?
That's a tough one, but I would say some of the most recent work is the development of Biodreston Elementary School. It's something that we have been advocating for, and I know many of you came out and testified to support it. We've been working on it for about a decade. And we had some, it wasn't, even though we found out we were going to get the school to be developed because there was significant overcapacity in our schools, portables at almost every elementary school in our area, which has an impact on learning. But essentially, we were able to advocate for that school. We were able to also increase the shell, which is the build out of that school. Just thinking ahead on the growth that was going to happen and being able to plan ahead. That was not a given. We had to work very, very hard for it and galvanize a number of stakeholders to speak out for that. And then I didn't leave it there. I helped to support the boundary study. I supported the naming of the school. I supported the principal selection and then established the very first PTA. I am so excited because I thought about running for that local PTA myself, but I thought, you know what, my job is to encourage others. And so I was part of really helping to find some of those leaders and help them to be successful. And they have created an amazing community, bringing in the best of all of our elementary schools. I'm very proud of that school. I've also done some work. I was given the award of a Census Bureau Partner Award. When I was doing some work in New York City in neighborhoods. These were student neighborhoods that were not well counted. I went door to door. I organized young people to go out and knock door to door. And because of my work and being able to reach the underrepresented and finding non-traditional ways of getting folks involved, I was awarded that partner award. And then lastly, I would say at a national level, I've also been heavily involved in building national networks for health and education. I've also helped to support biotech and bringing in new innovative technologies through the SBIR program. Those federal offices sit in Rockville and have been able to support the biotech corridor. So I know that science and technology, business, those are all really important, as are good schools and civic engagement. And I hope to be able to continue to expand upon that work and support Rockville.
Thank you, Ms. Ashton. Mr. Morris.
Well, I'm afraid nothing quite so illustrious. At the moment, my primary hopeful accomplishment has been working to advocate for increased affordable housing, not only development, but also housing stock diversity, to make it easier for people that are trying to stay in the area or come to the area to actually be able to do so and afford to live in the area as well as just actually sleep here. We've been pushing for some of the changes to accessory dwelling units and also for some of the developments. The conversation about the public facility standards, as a couple of you may recall from, trying to make it a little bit more manageable with the existing single-family plot, which is kind of the majority of the area, making it so that there's a little bit more flexibility in that for people to be able to make space. I'm afraid out of that. What do you, Mr. Boylan?
Thank you, Mr. Morris. Mr. Boylan?
Yes, thank you. So, as a member of the Rockville Recreation Parks Advisory Board, I'm going to give you two very different answers to your question. The first being long-term. In that 20 years, the city grew tremendously, and we were able to continue to provide significant recreation parks programs for the city. If you think about the King Farm development, Thomas Farm development, the Rec and Park Board was involved in a lot of important decisions and arrived at that made those Rec and Park programs continue to be first class as they've always been in Rockville. So my participation in that process has been very important to me, and I'm very proud of that. A very short-term commitment was my involvement in the caregiver grant process in 2017. That's where the city allocates money to caregivers in the city that need our financial help to provide those services. And while I was proud of my participation in that, frankly, I was more proud of the city itself for spending the money to do that for citizens in need. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Boylan. Mr. Thiroff?
Councilman Pashala, I think that I've been doing schools for a long time, and I'm very proud of the work I did with Bell and Julius West, but particularly Richard Montgomery High School. Continuing with my theme of trying to get people who don't necessarily agree on issues to agree, a former Councilman, Steve Abrams, may he rest in peace, was one of the people who led the fight not to have Richard Montgomery expand its boundaries and become a larger high school. I'm sure some of you may remember Steve. I remember him very well, and we've had arguments in my kitchen, in his kitchen. The bottom line is he and his kids came to Richard Montgomery High School, and they made it a better school. And his kids benefited significantly. They have a wonderful career. One's a lawyer, in a very successful practice. One is a businesswoman who's also very successful. My point is that the conversations that took place in the kitchens was not always pleasant, was not always cheerful, but people can come together. And I don't think it's magic. I think it's trust. People have to believe that someone is listening to them and trust them, and they trust that person to resolve differences. I can do that. And I think that as happened most recently with the new elementary school that Ms. Ashton described, and I feel somewhat like Ms. Ashton's grandfather or something, in the sense that Richard Montgomery is still very involved in wonderful operations. And my point simply is that even after all these years, trying to get the right boundaries set up for Bayard Rustin was not easy. There were people who did not like to go to that school, that wanted to go to a different school or whatever. But I think I am able to get people to trust me, to listen, and to try to come up with a good result.
Thank you, Mr. Thiroff. Mr. Miles?
Thanks for the question. I think the civic accomplishment of which I'm most proud is very much a work in progress. Ostensibly, I'd probably be joining the U.S. Navy, serving active duty. In that capacity, I work to improve the screening, diagnosis, and treatment of mental health disorders in the general pediatrics clinic. We often like to separate mental from physical health, but it's all one. Took that same background in thinking when I was deployed to 11 countries in Central South America as well as the Caribbean, as we established a de facto medical home where children were screened physically, and then we had, for those kids who had were dealing with psychological issues, we had the ability to have on-site mental health providers, and we wrote that up as a model for how service care should be provided. I've worked, as you see, at the sort of the confluence or the nexus of physical and mental health. And when I came here after becoming a civilian, took that to work on the mental health advisory committee for the county, and was able to join a great group who's, prior to my coming here, worked to have essentially a mental health court, so people in mental health crisis are not getting shuttled to the criminal justice system. It was a great pilot program. We advocated that they expand it, and very proud to be a member of that group. Again, that was started before I was there, but we advocated that it receive more funding. More recently, in terms of latching on to great groups, there's a group that you all started, the Rockville Goes Purple group. It looks at raise opioid awareness among people of Rockville, and my reason for joining is similar to the reason that I see, every day working in the emergency department in rural Maryland, seeing kids who are overdosing, misusing opioids. It's not really talked about as much, but certainly raising that issue up. I've been working with the previous opioid czar, working with the Maryland American Academy of Pediatrics, serving as their opioid liaison to raise this issue so that not only is there funding, but there's actual evidence-based interventions that will help address opioid misuse among children. And so those are sort of the civic engagement sorts of things that I'm most proud of at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miles. Ms. Funk?
Thank you. The civic accomplishment that I said I'm most proud of is I started the nonprofit of Taiwanese American First Responder Benevolent Organization. This nonprofit is a public nonprofit and is incorporated in Rockville City. And this organization's mission is to help first responders worldwide. So it's not only in the United States, but we also do charity work overseas. The past 3 years, we have done international donations and also local education. Local education meaning we connect with the local residents and with the police department, fire department to host seminars, safety seminars. For example, the most talked topic, active shooting scenario. How can parents can react? How can children can help each other out during these scenarios? And we do this starting with focusing on Asian communities. And this is our first seminar was held in Rockville City with the Rockville City Department participation. And there were 50 people, and in the next section we had 100 to attend. And all the parents and children, they love to ask questions and they want more these kind of safety issues to be addressed, and they wanted to be educated. So in this sense, I think that my organization is serving a bridge to connect the local community with the authority and trying to bring everybody together and trying to find a way to protect our home and find a better solution for the future. The safety protocol change every year, so we will modify it. That's how we learn from each other. At the beginning, when I wanted to start this nonprofit, I already volunteered in so many different community service, like serving NIH Children's Hospital, doing translating work for the ISO protocol to teach how to prevent from lead paint, and also the facility, how they should monitor their paint process, manufacturing process, and also participating watershed cleanup. And after all these work, I wanted to find a way to create this butterfly effect where when I wanted to promote an idea, how can I spread it more and influence more people by helping a certain group? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Fung.
Sure, thank you. I'm going to mix things up a bit, and I'm going to ask Mr. Boylan to answer first, and then we'll just go down and then wrap around. Okay? Second question, please, and if you need it repeated, just give a high sign and we'll be glad to do that. What is your concept of the role of economic development for Rockville? And we'll begin with Mr. Boylan.
Thank you. Well, we know, based on every prediction, that the population of Rockville is going to grow significantly in coming years. So we know we have that development of housing. The question is, what kind of business development makes sense to accompany that? When we see what's happening in what I'll call retail, whether we're talking about Sears or JCPenney or now Macy's, the traditional brick and mortar retail isn't working too well for many, many companies. And so one of my concerns is that our traditional idea of requiring retail space to accompany housing space may not make sense for us in the future. What we need is the development that will work not only for the citizens, but for the owners of the properties and the businesses that are going to go in there. So I think we really have to challenge how things are different today as opposed to how they were 20 years ago and adapt accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Boylan. Mr. Theroff?
Councilwoman Feinberg, I think that we have in Rockville the amazing circumstance of being near FDA and near NIH. I worked on FDA issues since 1984, and I still do some consulting on those issues. Whether it's pharmaceuticals, medical devices, any sort of FDA-related issues with NIH in the neighborhood. I still think there are economic opportunities to get not large pharmaceutical or medical device operations to locate in Rockville, but other circumstances. We can provide them with one of the key ingredients, which is people who know the federal government, people who are scientists, physicians, people who can provide them a wonderful base on which they can build. And I think Rockville is centrally located, and I think Rockville has the people in the city who can help those companies do well. I don't know that there is any formula to get them to come here over Gaithersburg or Bethesda or wherever, but I think we ought to try. And I think that economic development would bring with it ancillary development as well. That is, accountants and computer people and all sorts of other considerations. I'm not talking about manufacturing operations. I'm talking about think tank kind of operations, which would give them access to the federal government, Congress, and everyone else, and still be here in Rockville.
Thank you very much, Mr. Theroff. Dr. Miles?
Thank you for the question, Council Member. I think that in discussions of economic development, there are often, particularly recently among the council, not the council, but the issues discussed between the council and residents, sometimes they pit economic development versus people. And I think that, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, investing in people also generates benefit as well. I think that there doesn't necessarily have to be this zero sum between, economic development wins at the cost of the individual. And so I say that to say I'm very much inspired by many of the projects that are in the works, be it the Shady Grove project, Stone Street Corridor, or more recently the Twin Brook project. I think orienting things around transit hubs is the way to go in the future in terms of reducing, hopefully to the extent possible, congestion, while also reducing our economic footprint. Our environmental footprint from a carbon perspective. I was happy to see, I believe in the Shady Grove project, they're contemplating, obtaining LEED certification, which I think is a great thing in terms of environmental sustainability. It's also good for business. They spend less money on their various utilities, as well as it helps the air that we breathe and helps to stave off the effects of climate change that has on all of us, not only here in Rockville, but throughout the world. So I see us working with our businesses to support people and our people to support businesses. I think that both can be done in a way that's mutually beneficial and doesn't necessarily have to be an acrimonious sort of process. Thank you for the question.
Thank you very much. Jackie Fung, thank you.
Thank you. For the economic development in Rockville, one of the issues I wanted to address is the Rec Gate, because right now the Rec Gate is closed, and how are we going to use that area to redevelop to a better community? For example, are we going to recreate another King Farm Forest Grove area? And can we incorporate advanced technology into this new development? So for example, we have some countries that has sensors for street lights, so we can help to save energy, and also incorporating some security system that will also sensor triggered. And the other part of the economic development is that I noticed there are a lot of the Rockville City residents that owns business here. And these small business has been growing and strong established here in Rockville City for a decade or even longer. And how can we bring more these kind of homegrown business here and everybody develop a unique niche, a unique cultural background, restaurants or shops? And that would make the entire Rockville City even more diverse and bring in more people from other part of the DMV area to visit Rockville City. And that's my concept of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ashton?
Thank you. I think that this is a multifaceted question, and I think that Rockville has a lot of opportunity, but we are also at a critical juncture. Rockville currently is known as a major retail hub. We're known as a major scientific and technology corridor, a part of that anyway. And I think we see that there's some potential threats to that coming along. I think some of the members here have talked about the change in retail. They've also talked about, and we've seen that some of the cities in our area are attracting some of the tech types of companies that we'd like to have here. In my role as Senior Vice President at Ogilvy, one of the things that I do is helping to support small businesses, helping to think through the unique value proposition, helping to look at strategic planning and visibility and marketing so that we can attract new business here, that we can support our local businesses. I think that having smart growth is an important part of it. I also think that looking beyond how we raise the visibility and the value assets of what our city has to offer can help to attract people to support our businesses. I think economic development also involves affordable housing and thinking through as we look at development and build today and prove projects that are going to be coming online 15 years from now, that we look at making sure that there is a place in Rockville where our police officers, our teachers can live, and that we look at building and planning for mixed use. I think it means working with developers and talking to them and working with the Chamber of Commerce to help come to creative strategies. with the APFS that we recently underwent, I was heavily engaged with the school community, but I also spoke to RCC. I spoke to developers to say, you know, we don't have competing demands. We all want to live in a place where we can live, work, and continue to thrive. So that's some of the things that I would look at.
Thank you, and Mr. Morris.
All right, I'll try to make this fit into 2 minutes. One of the things about economic development as I see it is that the idea of working for a large corporation or a medium to large corporation for a salaried position is something that was available up until probably about the mid-90s as a regular thing. And a lot of the changes that you've seen in the economy, from things like Uber and Lyft to the artisanal shops popping up, artists and artisans are coming back into the fore as the way that people make their living, or at least the way that they make ends meet. If they have another job, they do something on the side. So one of the things that Rockville could do is to provide spaces that help facilitate or encourage that. We have the Rockville Economic Development Corporation, the brilliant, and the Small Women's Business Center is another excellent resource for that, but no physical infrastructure exists. So things like co-working spaces or maker spaces being encouraged into some of these transit-oriented developments would provide an opportunity for people that may not have the resources to build their own workshop to use these workshops for nominal fees and produce their product there that way. It would help with prototyping. It would also be a nice thing if some of these places had direct ties or just greater visibility for the Economic Development and Women's Business Center as we have them already. They have resources for doing lots of different things, from either vetting projects, building business plans, doing community outreach. But if you don't already know where they are and know how to find them, you might go several years building a business and not know that there was something along the way that could have helped you out with that. Likewise with some of the more residential-based businesses. And this is not just the working from home, but you know how we have medical professionals that will sometimes have home offices. Making sure that the rules about using your home for business purposes are also clear and apply to people not just owning homes, but also those that are in rental spaces. We'll come back to the rest of that later. I see my time is out.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I can choose? All right, I will start with Dr. Miles. The proposed FY 2020 budget has already been disseminated. How would you go about getting up to speed about it?
Thank you for the question, Councilmember. I see a budget as often said, as a moral document, and so very much would look at it through the lens of equity. To what extent are we making this city allowing people to take full advantage of all that this city has to offer? As such, it being a moral document, I would take very seriously my learning and the steep learning curve that would is commiserate with the task of a 400-page document. I would start first by looking to past budgets, looking through past meetings and see how we got and arrived at certain decisions. For example, figuring out why, for example, a victim advocate position was eliminated from the Rockville Police Department, or these other fund transfers. To what extent can those be used to improve the accessibility to programming for seniors and children? And then fast forwarding to the 2020 budget, we trying to figure out, and certainly working with colleagues, folks who know more about the budget than I do, like yourselves, working with our departmental representatives who craft it and make recommendations as well. And then also using my gut, I saw there's a line item for, I think it's $250,000 for Redgate for a course that won't be used, and think very seriously about sort of the long-term implications of that. So again, I think it's a matter of getting myself up to speed by learning from folks who know more about it than I do, and listening to my gut when it comes to issues of equity. Thanks for the question.
Thank you. Ms. Fong?
Thank you. For this part, I would say, since the budget that's already been in place, and how can we, what else we can do after the budget? Who are the target people that we wanted to attract? That is the questions we have to think about, because after the budgets it's being in place and the development has started, the next target is how can we make it longer, make it sustain more. The reason is a lot of people don't know about this plan. A lot of the Rockville City residents, they don't even know. How can we bring them together to listen to them, listen to their voice? And as Asian American take 20% part of this residents' census, have we heard anything about their idea? They may contribute more on how to help the city to build this together. I think we should come together as a group instead of we just use our current resource. And as me, I'm a trilingual. I will reach out to my community and listen to what they have to say, what they can contribute, instead of we crunch our numbers so tight and want to eliminate something. Why can't we listen to their idea and maybe we can use everybody's resources and bring up the city we want, right? Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Theron, will you want to go next?
Certainly. First of all, it's a very well done document. And I confess that over the years I read the summary and I read the highlights and I read what the taxes would be, and that's all I read. This time, because I thought I might get a question about the budget, it's a 300-page document. I found it to be not exhilarating, but very interesting. When I was in the federal government, developed a process that at the time, being the director of an office, I wasn't really for, but I think it made sense. And that is, what are you doing now that you might not want to do if you were in a budget crisis? What are you doing now that you might want to give up to do something different that would make your office or the department or whatever more effective? Budgets are building documents. They have a base and they come back with department heads and boards and commissions offering ideas, but they're basically molded around the total. In 9 months, I am not going to do anything to fully understand the budget the way that you do. But I think I am studying it and I'm trying to be more conversant with it, because I think, again, one of the ways that I think I can help you reach an agreement, and I don't think this is a budget that should be thrown in the air and looked at down to the last penny, but I do think that there are opportunities here, and I am concerned that we set into place something that will make the budget setting process next year better.
Thank you. Mr. Borland?
Thank you. In the world of government entities, the Rockville budget is a very strange creature in that it is balanced once again. I've begun reviewing the document, and the reason it's balanced every year is because it's a very organized process, and you can tell that from the document in that it has timelines for the whole process. It has the various departments contributing and what they contributed. In my review of it, what I'm really focusing on is what's different. Okay? One of the reasons we can balance a budget is that as a city, we're consistent in what we do. Well, my focus is on what are we doing differently and why, and to what extent have the various departments provided the basis for that difference. So that's really been my focus. We've been involved in the Rec and Park Board with the cost recovery process, which is also part of this program, where the various departments within Rec and Park say, here's how much we can recover from the cost of our services that we're providing. And I think what's important there is that the mayor and council are making decisions and supporting who pays for the most cost recovery? The people that can afford it. Whereas we support the programs for seniors and for youngsters more than we do for an adult who can afford to pay for it. So I think the mayor and council, the big thing that you bring to that is those value decisions about what we should be doing for our citizens. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morris?
Well, as my original background was in research, I have a tendency to want to ask some of those questions about how and why a certain decision was come to. Usually getting through budgets, it's a reflection of where people think things have to go or where they would much like to steer it. So comparing what is listed as the stated goals at the outset and then seeing how the spending lines up with that, and if at all possible, taking a quick line through some of the projected needs. But also it's a question of, is this moving far enough in the right directions to get where we might want to go next? It's always a matter of looking a little bit down the road. The context of how we got to where we are is important, but the context of how long that timeline really is going to be for where we're going next and how we're going to try and get there becomes one of the questions that I would then be asking. So, of course, if someone happened to have answers, I'd be happy to ask them those questions and try and field some of that information out there. But I'd probably, in all honesty, close myself in a room for a couple of days with it, go through it, jot down the questions, and then try to find the appropriate people to ask for further clarification.
Thank you. Ms. Ashton?
Thank you. I did want to acknowledge city staff and all of you that Rockville has received distinguished budget awards. I think it speaks to the diligence and the work that you all have done. And in looking at and preparing and being involved in Rockville, I've read your trend reports, I've read the budget, and I have to say you are extremely thorough, and I would be delighted to join that team. I think that I would be in a stage of listening and learning. That's something that I take as an approach, as when you have someone new on board before you bust everything, or you really take time to listen to the stakeholders. Does the budget align with the new priorities and the vision for what we want to see for Rockville? And if not, let's talk to stakeholders about what we want to see. I think that Rockville has amazing services, but I also know that we have some constraints. And it ties to the economic development question that you asked earlier as well. I would, in addition, look at this budget and say, well, if there are things that don't match our priorities, how can we better align them? How can we be creative and look for partnerships? How can we look for grants? I know there are several city initiatives that are by major associations and the government that we could potentially pursue to better meet the needs of our community. So I'd be creative in that way. I also had a chance to see that you are doing a citizen survey on what our budget priorities. I want to put in a plug for that. There's an opportunity to go online and to say what matters to you. I think that Rockville has been incredibly transparent. I think one thing I'd like to help do also is increase civic engagement. I had a chance to look at the community input surveys and the planning for Community 2040. And I was dismayed to see that at the African American and Latino input opportunity, there were only 4 people, and 1 person completed the survey. I think the city is trying, but I think I'd like to bring my skills to help figure out how do we go to people and actually listen to them and go to where they live, work, and play and get them involved.
Thank you.
My mic back on. Those are the questions that we had, and we're now ready for closing statements. Each of you has 2 minutes for a closing statement. Who haven't we started with? Mr. Morris.
Okay, well, how to do this succinctly? I came to entrepreneurship out of necessity rather than out of being in a position of just choosing to branch out on my own. As a family manager with an extremely complicated set of obligations and time constraints, the only viable option was to go into business myself. And that process is a brutally difficult thing. It's difficult in its own right for those reasons because it's just building something out of nothing. But every step of the way, the systems that are in place existed as though they were designed for someone that was already well established, and this was more of a pet project for them. And that is one of those economic development issues that I alluded to earlier that really could use a little bit of focus. One of the reasons that people may not have shown up to some of the other events is that if you have less control over your work schedule, as many people in service industries, and this includes nursing as well, do, then it's very difficult to make it out to those kinds of events because you can't just take off, you can't just get coverage, you can't make it up later. And one of the things that I would like to do, if given an opportunity to work with the council, is to help them find ways to make things like that less of an obstacle, make it more accessible to the people that help make the city run, but don't always have time to participate in the running of the city. The ways that people in lower income brackets or further from transit might struggle to participate, and the ways that some of those concerns that I am now intimately familiar with might be addressed, sometimes just requires being able to be in the right place at the right time. As Ms. Ashton is quite right on finding them where they live, work, and play, but they very rarely have a chance to come to these tables. They very rarely have a chance to come to the outreach efforts that are put forward. And so finding the right ways to be back and forth between those two, or being the go-between and sometimes mediator, would be my preferred role. I'm a consultant. I'm here to help find answers and then get out of the way.
Thank you. Ms. Ashton.
Yes, so thank you for having us all here today. One thing I did feel as I was reading all the statements is you have 22 good candidates, and I think all of us are more involved because of this process, so I want to thank you. I hope we will continue to be. I think that I represent diversity, I represent fairness, I represent consensus building. I represent someone who knows how to manage business, who can attract new business, someone who can do community engagement. I've done it, I am doing it, I will continue to do it no matter what. I really appreciate what Mr. Morris said, and in some of my work, I do realize that some people cannot come out, but one of the things that I've done is find ways to meet their Maslow's, their hierarchy of, what are the needs they have in their lives. In the past, I have increased civic participation in community meetings by providing food, bringing games for kids. I've just, there's things where it is not that difficult, but we got to think out of the box on how do we get to meet the problems and find new solutions. I also bring energy and experience in stakeholder engagement and audience analysis and the kinds of things that we need to be looking at to attract businesses here in Rockville to support our communities. We have 113 neighborhoods and civic associations. We see a challenge where, some of our businesses are not thriving. How can we work together to have maybe neighborhood nights in some of our businesses to support them? I would like to, really focus on supporting our schools, increasing coordination with MCPS and County Council, representing and thinking through supporting business growth. I would like to support and engage diverse residents. I feel like we've tried, but I think there's some creative ideas I'd like to bring to the table. Also, I'd like to support healthy communities. I know that we have the opioid initiative, and I'm so excited about it, and I think there's a potential to do more there, as well as to support green initiatives in Rockville.
Thank you. Ms. Fung.
Thank you. I am prepared and committed to serve the mayor and council vacancy, this position. I also represent diversity. As a matter of fact, I'm the first Asian American that applied for this council vacancy. And I'm sure that with my background, being a first, we can create many new activities and bring in new development. For example, we had the Chinese New Year festival that just finished to celebrate Chinese New Year, and we have upcoming International Night. And last year, we had the very first bubble tea festival that held in Rockville City Town Center. It was a great success. And these are from the community, they wanted to do it. But someone has to go out there and tell them, you can do it. We can bring what we have, our uniqueness, and show it to everyone and let everybody come together and participate. And I would say the last year was a great success for the Bubble Tea Festival. And that made me think that there are more people out there that wanted to do the same thing. So if chosen, I believe my diversity would bring in a lot of value to the Rockville City Mayor and Council and the government, the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. When asked how she makes her political decisions, a successful public servant from Maryland once said, "If you're there for the children, you make the right decisions, whether it's their health, their education, or the economic security of their families." I wholeheartedly agree with that sentiment and would use a similar calculus to weigh in on the decisions before this body. Making sound and responsible financial decisions will allow Rockville to continue obtaining the lowest possible interest rates on loans for needed expenses so that we and future generations are not burdened with unnecessary debt. Modernizing our infrastructure will create safer streets to walk along and reduce fatalities for all age groups. Having productive conversations with our county and state representatives will help to eliminate overcrowding in schools and meaningfully address our infrastructure needs. Attracting businesses to the area in a way that is forward-thinking and consistent will benefit families by reducing the tax burden while providing more incentive for them to spend their money locally. Maintaining our commitment to provide affordable housing will help to ensure that community members of all ages can take advantage of all that Rockville has to offer. Working even harder to fill vacancies on boards and commissions in a timely manner gives people with different ideas and backgrounds a chance to create the Rockville they wish to see for themselves and their children. Continuing to improve community-police relations will help to ensure that all citizens are safe and treated justly. Most important, redoubling our efforts to meaningfully address climate change will allow all of us, including our children, to live in a world that will be conducive to basic human existence. If appointed, I will continue to advocate and work for those who are marginalized and may be unable to advocate for themselves, as doing so benefits us all. Thank you for your time, and I hope that you fill this vacancy with someone who keeps the best interest of every citizen in mind, especially the most vulnerable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Theroff.
I'm applying, and my singular focus is to assist the mayor and council to come together, achieve consensus and agreement on the important issues you're going to face over the next 9 months. I'm good at it. In my prior career, I led federal and state agencies and very well represented corporate defendants to multi-billion-dollar settlements. It wasn't easy, it was contentious, but we were able to come to agreement. I'm experienced in successfully bringing diverse and disparate parties to reach agreement, even though their differences are serious and principled. However, what I want to talk about are seniors. I think the most recent Washington Post article about the fact that unmet needs of seniors living in their homes is a national crisis demonstrates that we have work to do here in Rockville in terms of finding out what are immediate and necessary ways to keep people in their homes. I go to the senior center. I have a garden at the senior center. It's a great activity. I think it's a wonderful resource and asset for the city. But I think we need to find out who isn't coming to the senior center and is in need. I think we have to look to the minority communities in Rockville to see if we're meeting those seniors' needs. And I think that is a long-term process, not something to be solved in 9 months, but I think we should start.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boylan.
Thank you. And thank you for conducting the appointment process in this professional manner and allowing me to participate in it. I am eager for the job and committed to exerting the time and energy necessary to be a successful addition to your number. I ask that you consider my enthusiasm, wealth of experience, and past involvement with the city in arriving at your decision on this important position. Rockville succeeds as a city because of the cumulative work of many individuals, including our current mayor and council, your predecessors, and many dedicated employees and volunteers. I am one of those dedicated volunteers and desire to elevate my service to the city and its citizens by performing as a city council member. As a member of the council, I will express candid views and make decisions that will not always be popular with every citizen, official, interest group, or neighborhood. But that's the heat that comes with being in the City Council kitchen, as you well know. I commend my fellow applicants for their past service to the city and their willingness to step up to the challenging role as a City Council member. Because of the large number of applicants, I have started to refer to us as the class of 2019. That label is also appropriate because the credentials of the applicants reveal a group of first-class individuals that I feel that I'm very impressed by. We're lucky to have all of you in our city. To my fellow class members, I wish you well in your future endeavors, although I can't honestly say that I wish you good luck in the appointment process. In closing, I believe that the four of you are the most familiar with the demands of the position and are the ones best suited to make the decision as who will fill it. Therefore, I will support the decision you make and sincerely congratulate the applicant you select. Because of my personal bias, I have to admit that I would prefer to be offering those congratulations while looking in a mirror. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you all so very much. Just to tell you the next steps, we will have 2 more interview panels this afternoon, and then we will do a selection of the top 5 candidates who will be brought back on Tuesday evening. So you are welcome to stay around if you'd like, or watch us from home on television if you have nothing else to do. And please stay tuned. You'll know later today if you've made the top 5, and then we'll go towards Tuesday evening. We thank you all very much for your time, your interest, and support of the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, I do. Yes.
From City Council. Yeah, I feel very strongly.
Doctor, it's nice to meet you.